Oh boy, a show from my early 20s that I remember enjoying a lot. I'm sure this won't go sour in a hurry. No, not at all. So, I remember when I was just a young sprout of a man, I was quite into Comic Party. It had pretty girls, a guy who was trying to break into writing manga, pretty girls, a lot of anime references that I understood, and also it had pretty girls. So, with this memory well in mind, I hopped in the Wayback Machine and took a crack at this show again. Oh, memory, you arrogant bastard, how you've betrayed me once again. So while I wasn't lying in what my assessment of what Comic Party was about, I had forgotten that it's also extremely staid. There's not a whole ton going on with this show, and it doesn't move at the kinetic pace that I seem to recall. But then it's also a 12-episode TV series from 2001, so maybe my expectations have changed in recent years. But more to the point, the show itself is about as squeaky clean and wholesome as you can get in a show about a fan-driven industry, and something about it feels really disingenuous when the characters go on at length about how much they love doing doujinshi. Something about it feels off, and maybe I can work out just what it is while I talk about the show. So the original Comic Party was a game that came out in 1999 and was, as it was called back then, a girl get game. It originally featured adult content, but that was patched out for the PSP and Dreamcast releases. Published by Aquaplus in their Leaf imprint, which specialized in adult games, then by Aquaplus itself after the naughty bits were patched out, the game was successful enough to warrant an anime. Unlike more modern harem shows, the girls are not all tailored to specific kinks, but they do have little hints of this in them. It's much less overt, and you know what? A little subtlety goes a long way. Our main character, Kazuki Sendou, is on the cusp of going to university when his fellow classmate Taishi drags him to Comic Party, a clear send-up of Comic Ket, which takes place in Odaiba. His childhood friend and official first girl, Mizuki, tells him that this is a bad idea because otaku are smelly and weird. Those of us who have been to an anime convention recently say, yeah, we know. But Mizuki is the voice of reason, if by reason you mean conventional Japanese societal wisdom. All the same, Kazuki decides to give it a shot because he's a doofus with talent, but apparently zero drive. Well shit, man, he could have just been a YouTuber. So now he's got to try his hand at writing manga in the form of doujinshi, which loosely translated means fan comic, or more properly, self-published works usually parodying popular works or making particular ships out of them. While he's going through this adventure in which Mizuki gets repeatedly trampled and nearly killed, he meets Yu Inagawa, who's from Kansai and has the accent to match. Not in English maybe, but in Japanese it's definitely there. Her family owns a hot spring, but she's down in Tokyo to do some schooling before she's got to saddle up and circle the wagons and run herself a dang hot spring. Accents are hard to translate, kids. Maybe a Texas/Southern accent isn't ideal for Kansai, but for American ears, I think it gets the job done. You hear different and folksy charm, and I think that crosses over as well as one can reasonably expect. Well, hanging out with you and getting the lowdown on doujinshi, she gets harassed by her rival, the astonishingly stupid but alarmingly popular Amy Oba. Amy has lots of fans and no brains to go with it, but apparently her work sells very well. This is all inferred information, mind you. They never really go into what precisely all these artists work on, though we're told that some characters do better or make better work than the others. We just had to take it on faith, I guess. But at least the series tries to make a statement here or there about what kind of work should sell better, I guess. Side note, what they think should sell better is not what actually sells. How tragic. Kazuki also meets up and squares off against two unfortunate stereotypes. One skinny, haggard-looking dude, and one fat dude in an Idol t-shirt. They're just called vertical and horizontal, but I call them Dirtbag 1 and 2. But they show up every time there needs to be an active conflict to be punching bags for the series. Their main purpose is to provide examples of how not to be a complete twat waffle, which apparently is still a fucking problem. They're the outliers, so I guess that's good. This is one of the big reasons the show feels sanitized, though, because anyone who's been around con culture for a long time knows that it's full of smelly dweebs and people with no social skills and straight-up creepers. But here it's limited to these two specific assholes, and everyone else is of completely standard shape and size and social constraints and all that. I suppose we could get deep in the weeds about Japan's deep and abiding hatred for body diversity, but let's face it, this is based on a girl get game, so let's not bother. Kazuki is in this entire situation because of his friend Taishi, who is, well, everyone has someone like Taishi in their lives, I think, in their teens and 20s. Someone who is so into something that it overtakes their entire life. Someone who has no self-awareness nor capacity to shut the fuck up when the occasion calls for it. This is how I know I've gotten older, sadly. Whereas I was drawn to the energy and exuberance that Taishi has before, now it feels irritating at best and exhausting at worst. But he's the one who's in deep to the nerd scene and drags Kazuki into it, and just about wrecks his life over it. What a great friend, huh? So I referred to Mizuki earlier as the first girl, quote-unquote, which makes her the default. But I think they're hell-bent on making sure there's no actual resolution in this show, so we only get hints at it. I think I've really grown out of this sort of storytelling, to be perfectly honest, because what I really want in my stories nowadays is some manner of catharsis or payoff. And when we get a show that has absolutely zero, to the point of unintentional comedy, I can't help but just pack it in mentally. Don't worry, the writing room packed it in way before I did. That's not to say that storytelling is easy, but when you make a series with no semblance of a satisfying conclusion, it's clear that the minimum effort for maximum payoff was desired and received. As far as other characters are concerned, there are a few more. There's Chisa Tsukamoto, who runs the print shop and is a danger to herself and others. Makamura, who runs the events, and Aya Hasabe, who has great art talents but is a black hole of charisma. She exists in the series but doesn't really do anything other than get Kazuki in trouble with those two otaku dirtbags. There's just not a lot of meat on the bones of the story to dig into, and let me break it down for you why. For the majority of the episodes, Kazuki goes around to the other characters and learns why they do what they do in a very cookie-cutter way. Their reasoning is very simple, and it feels designed to be heartwarming, or at the very least, seemingly pure. Given how dank otaku culture is, and really always has been, this is just disingenuous. I think maybe I fell for it, or was at least more receptive to it when I watched it 13 years ago, but times change. Not that I want to say anything weird like, I understand the world better, but I've watched things that feel more honest about their material in the intervening years. I've seen this sort of show done better. At least Reiko is more straightforward about what she's into. So Reiko is the cosplay girl and one of my favorite lady characters out there because she just does the same kind of thing with cosplay as I do with videos. She makes the costume she wants, damn the consequences. I make videos on stuff I want to make, same thing. I mean, the purple hair and the big baps are always something that are going to catch my eye. But she's also cool and does cosplays about what she cares about and not just whatever is popular and not in things that she considers gaudy. And it's probably the one saving grace of this show upon the rewatch. So once we hit the halfway point in our show, Kazuki gets the great idea to make what ends up being the worst comic in existence by following the trend of doing what's popular and boiling it all down into its constituent parts. What follows is 6 episodes of The Opening. Yeah, Kazuki's shit doesn't sell because it's obviously pandering and overglossy and not a good product. Everyone takes one look at it and says, "What the hell, dude?" Now, if this was real life, there would probably be a ton of morons who'd snap it up and call it the greatest of all time. After all, we're living in a world where S.H.I.E.L.D. hero is considered haute couture. At any rate, this causes Kazuki to get depressed. And to be fair, I can see why. Originally, I thought he was sad because he wasn't doing well. What he was really sad about is that this is probably the first honest-to-goodness failure in his entire life. When I was that age, that sort of thing would have busted me up too, so I can't blame him for being bent out of shape, but the writers take this opportunity to absolutely torpedo Kazuki's momentum. I can understand if they wanted to shut him down for an episode or two, maybe even 2.5 at the absolute latest, but he is absolutely worthless for the rest of this 12-episode show. Whereas he could have been taking this time to learn something about doujinshi or follow along with one of the others and learns what makes them tick or what makes them interesting, he just kind of stares off into the middle distance. Oh, the tragedy of youth. Oh, he completely misunderstood his audience. Hlurp-a-derp, derp, derp, derp. It's tragic, really, because while I remember being mildly annoyed at this sort of thing when I watched it for the first time, now I am really not dancing to its beat. Depending on your age and general disposition, it might swing your way a little bit more or a little bit less, but for this particular fella, this is not my jam. But Kazuki does manage to get his head out of his ass long enough to get himself sorted out through remembering why he did this stuff in the first place. He learns this through the voice of Ikumi Tachikawa, the world's most almost dead child. If she was any sicker, John Cena would be visiting her. But learning how much she liked it kicks him back into work mode, for better or for worse, right before the deadline. So now he has to really crunch to make it. Sitting back and thinking on it, Kazuki is the perfect protagonist for this show. He's got talent and interesting characters around him, but he has no real drive to do anything, and seems perfectly happy to just let life pass him by, especially if he doesn't succeed massively on his first try. It's sad because there's some good groundwork for a character arc here, but it's not utilized properly to really make a compelling work like I think it has the potential to. I don't often say read the manga instead, but Comic Party is just too much of a mess to really make a go of it, or bother to take a look at. It doesn't make hash enough to be a laughable watch, it's just there. It's out of print now, so I wouldn't shed a tear for it, and it's probably easily found if you're of a mind to do so. The English voice cast is just fine. It's got a lot of names that you'll recognize if you're into early 2000s dubs, and it's perfectly passable, and some parts of it will actually make the show watchable. Liam O'Brien as Taishi is really solid because he brings the right kind of over-the-top nuttiness to the character that could easily be played a little bit too straight. But as far as Comic Party is concerned, I can't even in good faith say take it or leave it. I just want to say leave it. I don't hate it. I am aggressively neutral towards it. Honestly, what I feel is more anger towards myself for betraying younger me and my thoughts on my own taste at the time. I love Comic Party's characters. I do not care for Comic Party as a show. So, sad to say, this won't be getting anything like a good recommendation for me. But some days, that's just what you end up with. The only choice is to soldier on and move forward. I'm sure there's some sort of weird pun about closing the book on this one, but really, the worst thing I can say is that it's actually going to come down off my shelf and be put in one of my large DVD storage bins. Sorry, Comic Party, you just didn't stand the test of time. That being said, this is Professor Otaku, the greatest American anime critic, signing off.